Welcome to by far the most controversial video we're going to make on this channel. So today we are talking about string pins in bowling. This has been a very hot topic over the last couple of weeks because on the PBA Tour, they just had some exhibition matches on some actual string pins. They had a one-handed versus two-handed match, and then they also had the strike derby, which they've been running for a few years. So today we're going to talk everything and anything about string pin bowling. Now, I do want to make a disclaimer and an ask for everybody. Please keep the comment section constructive. Please don't just make it, string pins suck, because that doesn't really get us anywhere. That doesn't really benefit the cause. Our goal here is to try to come up with solutions, try to discuss the problem, what it is, why it's going on, and then what we can do in the future. So please keep the comments constructive. Please don't attack anybody or anything, but let's get right into it. So what are string pins? If you're new here and you're just hearing the term string pin bowling, what does it actually mean? Well, currently in most bowling centers, really across the world, you're seeing what we call free fall pin machines. So that means the pins are not attached to anything. They are placed down by a giant machine by the pinsetters, and then the pins can fly all over the place. They can come out from the back. They can be everywhere and anywhere. Now, string pins are a little bit different. These actually have a string on the top of the pin that is tied to the pin setter, and then whenever pins fall and then it needs to do a re-rack, the strings are pulled and the pins are put back into place. So this sounds very, very odd. It sounds like there's could be a lot of problems involved. Luckily, the technology has improved a lot over the last 5 to 10 years, so there's a few less problems than maybe what you have seen 10-ish years ago. But let's talk about what the public backlash have been, because this change, this new technology was not met with much positivity when it first came out. So about 5 to 6 years ago, there was a PBA regional event. It was either a regional or an exhibition match where they played on string pins. And seeing videos of it, it was one of the worst events you could possibly imagine. There were pins falling all over the place. The strings would get tangled and you'd see weird pin leaves getting picked up. The amount of 210s that I saw picked up because a string would wrap around the pin or wrap around another string and all the pins would fall was absolutely crazy. Now, that was very early in the string pin technology days. We're at a point now where the tech has evolved quite a bit, both from Quebeca AMF and from Brunswick, who are the two main manufacturers of string pins, where now they fall a little bit more consistently. However, from the strike derby and from the one-handed versus two-handed match, there was a lot of problems that you noticed. The pins seemed dead. The pins did not bounce off the walls. The pins didn't really do much. You saw a lot of splits. You saw some weird leaves, and then you saw a couple pins actually fall because strings got wrapped around them. So lately, there's been a massive backlash about string pins and about its resurgence and it getting put into many bowling centers across the US. So why are we seeing so many string pin machines being added across the United States and even across the world? It looks like in the UK, there's a lot being added also. Why are we seeing this? Well, there's a couple major reasons. So one of the biggest one is cost. The free fall pin machines are insanely expensive. And across the nation, they are also getting very, very old. These are machines that have been in for 10, 20, 30, 40, even 50 years in some crazy situations. And that causes a massive problem because when things get older, as you know, with a car, you need to be replacing things more and more. There's more issues that happen because a free fall pin machine is insanely complex at the end of the day. The mechanics and the tech behind it is actually kind of wild, but it is very complex. And with complex machinery, you're going to have a lot of problems that come up. String pins are very simple at the end of the day, and they're very cheap. So the lowering of cost in general of these string pins is why you're seeing so many of them across the nation. And then another reason is just the rise of mechanic costs, because it's very hard to find mechanics for bowling alleys at this day and age, and they are very expensive to have. So that is why you're seeing a strong push for string pins. So now what we're going to do, we're going to talk about the pros and we're going to talk about the cons of string pin. We're going to loop it all together at the very end. We're going to come up with a conclusion and what my future predictions are for string pins. So I know this probably isn't the part that people want me to start with, because overall the public backlash is very strong and there's much more negativity than positivity in string pin bowling. Let's talk about the pros first, though. We're going to talk about the pros of string pin, why it's being incorporated. Aren't just evil entities up above saying we need string pin everywhere to ruin bowlers' lives. That's not happening. There are reasons that this is happening. And we have 4 major reasons why string pin machines are being incorporated across the nation. So So number one is, like I already mentioned, just the price, just the cost. So string pin machines are very cheap to actually install. The parts, there's very few parts. You need just new strings and that's about it. So you don't have all of these rising part costs that you have to find for old machines. So you're not spending thousands of dollars on machines. You're not spending tens of thousands of dollars on mechanics or outside mechanics, or even the free fall pin machine companies coming in to help out. So right now, on average, it's about $60-ish thousand a year to hire a full-time mechanic in a bowling center. That's a very just rough estimate of how much it is, but most bowling centers need a full-time mechanic to be able to keep these machines running. String pins, you don't need that. You don't need that at all. You can have the person working behind the desk be taught how to untangle the strings. You're good to go. That has been really the only issue with string pins, is just detangling the strings or being able to add in new strings if any of them rip for whatever reason. That is arguably the most important reason and the biggest reason why string pins are being incorporated, because bowling alleys don't make much money at the end of the day. Bowling is not a profitable sport by any means. So having that lowering of cost is absolutely massive. Now, these next two are kind of minor, but do fit very well. And there's two other pros that I'm going to hit on, and one of them is less breakdowns. The machines break down a lot less, which coincides with our first part. You're going to see a lot less issues come up. You're replacing less belts. You're doing a lot less just maintenance in general. So you're able to keep all of your bowling lanes functioning, up and running, because the worst thing for a bowling center is a lane or two lanes breaking down and the mechanic not being able to fix it for a day or two. That is one of the most costly parts of a bowling center, because if you imagine, say you have 16 bowling lanes, you have 16 lanes of revenue coming into your bowling center. If one of them breaks down for whatever reason and you need to wait for a part and you can't get it running, that is a 16th of your income that is out the door. That's 16th of your revenue for the day, for the week, for the weekend, whatever it may be, completely out the door. You're not making any money on that lane, and then you're losing money because the mechanic has to come in and actually fix it. So there are a lot less breakdowns with string pin machines, which is great. Again, another cost reason. The next one is allegedly that is a better racking system. Now, this one can be hit or miss. I haven't seen much true proof of this. I did a lot of research trying to figure it out. But overall, string pin machines are supposed to have a better racking system. So one problem you see in a lot of free fall centers is you have to be very specific with where the pin goes down. And you're going to have those lanes where the two pin every shot is moved slightly left or slightly right, or the 3-pin is moved slightly right. And this causes a ton of problems. That makes striking either much easier or much more difficult on some of these lanes. So string pins are not supposed to have that problem. And the final pro I have for string pin machines is, this is also going to be a con, by the way, is it is still evolving. This is still a very new technology. Brunswick did have it back in the 90s. It was very much just a very soft ploy at that time. I think they ended up just buying the rights to it from a company that had them. But now, because it's getting bigger and bigger, I think we're going to see string pins evolving a little bit more, hopefully getting better. So this should be an early infant child stage of where string pins are at. Hopefully we can get to that adult stage sooner rather than later. But let's go into the cons of string pin bowling. This is probably what a lot of people came here for, so apologies for making you wait so long. But let's talk about the negatives of what string pin bowling brings to the sport. So starting us off is going to be the biggest one that we noticed in the PBA exhibition matches: odd carry. The carry of string pins is wonky, super wild. As you notice, there were very few messengers in those matches on the PBA Strike Derby and the one-handed versus two-handed competition. Even though these guys have 500 plus rev rates, there are some terrible leaves that happen. There's a lot more splits. You're seeing a lot more just missed messengers, a lot more flat 10s, a lot more 7-10s, a lot more 4-9s. 4-9s seem to be the most common thing with string pins, which is crazy. So you're seeing a lot less interesting carry happening. Everything that happens is honestly very like true and what you would quote unquote expect, and there's a lot less breaks. However, the breaks come in when the strings get tangled together. You're still seeing pins falling for just no reason. It seems like nothing knocks them over and then they fall, and that's because a string does it. So even though that a lot of them are USBC and PBA sanctioned, there's still those issues that happened. It sounds like you're supposed to put the pin back up if it falls because of a string, which adding judgment calls to a sport is a bad idea. This is the point where you look towards any high school golf competition where the players are keeping score and they're just giving themselves like break after break after break because it's a judgment thing and they can. So that's one of the biggest issues right now is that odd carry. So more splits, less room for error. There are still breakdowns, by the way. Yes, there are less breakdowns than free fall machines, but it doesn't take away breakdowns altogether. There are still issues. There are still times where all the pins just fall on the out of the rack and you need a mechanic to go fix them. We noticed this a lot in the strike derby, by the way, that there was a lot of times where the rack was just completely destroyed and they had to spend like 10 to 30 seconds trying to fix it, which was very odd. Originally, before that competition, I thought that there was virtually zero breakdowns. That competition showed there's a lot more breakdowns than we know. Which gets into my other major con, which was also a pro, is that it's still evolving. We're still very early. We're in the infant stages of string pins. So there's so many problems that come up with, so many issues, so many just things that go wrong. And hopefully they get fixed with more technology, with more evolution in string pin, but we honestly are not sure. Now, why are we seeing so many string pins after all the pros, after all the cons? A lot of bowling centers would probably see the cons and think, man, these aren't that good. Bowlers are not going to enjoy this weird carry, and just a general negative to the sport, a general negative to their scores, because scores are lower on string pins. However, we got to remember that bowling alleys don't make much money. Money runs the world, money runs everything, and true just bowling does not work very well. Back in the 70s, back in the golden age, yes, you could just run a bowling center and you could just charge people $1 a game, 50 cents a game, whatever it may be, and you'll have the place packed the entire night, the entire week because of leagues, because of all of that. However, we need to remember only 1% of bowlers right now actually compete in league. It's a little over 1 million members. About 1% of bowlers, 1.6% that actually compete in leagues, where back in the 70s, back in the 80s, that was around 5 to 10%. You had 5 to 10% of bowlers actually competing in leagues. So you don't have that consistent income coming in for the bowling centers. That's why you're seeing a lot more open play. That's why you're seeing a lot more openness to open play, especially from Bolero centers. The reason for this is it's more money at the end of the day. It keeps them open. It keeps them operating. You've probably noticed a lot of bowling centers closing over the last 20-ish years. One reason for that was similar to movie theaters where they opened way too many, and opening a bowling alley was like the get-rich-quick scheme at the time. It's kind of like crypto right now, where if you want to make money, you go do this. Well, that was bowling alleys. So now a lot of them are closing because there were just too many. However, also, bowling alleys just don't make much money, so you need to find ways to get that added revenue. That's why you're seeing them turn into family entertainment centers. You're seeing arcades, you're seeing laser tag, big food and drink menus, all of that. That's why you're seeing a lot more of that, and that's where string pins will also come in. Because open bowlers don't care about string pin. They're not that. A child's birthday party doesn't care about string pins. They don't care much about the bowling at the end of the day. They just want to have a place to have a birthday party. So that is why you're going to see a lot more of them in the future. Overall, just be able to save bowling centers, which is not great because it puts a band-aid on a bullet wound where you don't want to just lower the cost of the bowling center. You want to increase that revenue. So this doesn't actually increase revenue. This probably lowers revenue because you're going to have league bowlers who, if you look at any comment section, say, I'm going to quit bowling if I have to bowl on string pins, which is fair at the end of the day. It's a big change to the sport, but this is not going to raise revenue. So that's a lot of stuff about string pin bowling. Let's go into some future predictions and honestly my hopes for what string pins are. So I'm going to expect that we're going to see a lot of string pins being incorporated into smaller bowling centers as a last ditch effort to try to save the business. So a lot of dying bowling centers will probably incorporate them just to keep the doors open. Now, we have seen a strong drop in bowling alleys across the nation, especially smaller town ones. So if they are not making any money, they might go to string pin just to save that little bit extra, because they are also very power efficient. So in order to just save that money and keep the doors open, you're going to see more in those centers. I very much assume Bolero is going to keep adding string pins because they are a multi-billion-dollar business. So just like the McDonald's of the world, just like the Walmarts of the world, they're just looking at overall costs. And the way to lower those costs by a lot is to add in string pins. So I could see Bolero adding more and more and more string pin centers, which is an overall negative for a lot of bowlers. Now, I'm going to leave you guys to a positive, though, to a hope, is that string pin technology will improve. Now, like I mentioned earlier, we're in an infant stage. We aren't really at a very adult stage of string pins. Hopefully, the tech will improve. We need a lot more research, though. We need a lot of research. We need some bowling company. We need some bowling group, either whether it be a Brunswick, an AMF, a USBC, put some money in, put some time in to work with some scientists, to work with some people who can actually figure out how to make string pin act like free fall. I don't think there'll be any problems with bowlers if you can make string pin mimic the fall and the pin action of free fall. Then it's just going to be a win-win and you're going to see string pin everywhere. That's my hope. Is it way too optimistic? Probably, but that is really what I would love to see in the future for these. The other big thing is we're not going to see many centers switch at the end of the day. There are so many bowling centers whose owners are actual bowlers and they hate string pins. There's a lot of hatred for string pins, so you're going to see a lot of centers not have them. So if your main bowling center does add string pins, look elsewhere. Just look around your area. I guarantee there will be places that will never incorporate string pins into their bowling alley. So leave that as a positive. Also, if you're somebody who refuses to bowl on them, you guaranteed can find a bowling center that does not have string pins at the end of the day. And now, finally, in conclusion, will string pins save bowling? No. Does bowling need saving right now? Not really. It's still doing well. It's just doing well in different ways. So will string pins keep some businesses open? Yes. Will it be the savior? No. What we need to do is incorporate a lot more open bowlers into leagues should be a positive, trying to grow the sport. That should really be what this is an emphasis on. Again, this is just a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. We need to bring those league bowler numbers up. We need everybody here to try to find ways to do that. For example, for a little personal anecdote, the place I work has had a bowling league for about 20 to 25 years, and it's always been a very casual league, nothing crazy. Well, the league was dying after COVID, as a lot of leagues were. So we brought in a lot more younger people into the league. We just did some pushing, did some marketing, did some advertising, things like that. Did some pushing to get people to come. And then now the league is again thriving. So that is one positive. What you can bring to your bowling center is try to grow those leagues. Try to bring those open bowlers into leagues. Try to have easy ways for them to get introduced into a league, whether it be short form leagues, whether it be doubles leagues, trios leagues, giving them a bowling ball to start them off on their journey, things like that. Any little positive to get them into league bowling will be the way to actually improve bowling, and string pins really won't do it. But it is a positive on the cost, on the pocketbooks of a lot of these bowling center owners. But with that, that is going to be everything. Please let me know down below in the comments what your thoughts are on string bowling, on string pin bowling. Remember, keep it constructive. Don't keep it too negative. Don't just say this sucks or you suck. Like, that doesn't get us anywhere. Give us some constructive feedback, your thoughts, what you think can happen to improve string pins as a whole. Otherwise, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe, and I will see you on the next one.